Welcome again to Wickerson Studios. I'm going to do a new video series dealing with Grasshopper for Rhino, and I wanted to pay a little bit of honor or homage to some people that made this possible for me a while ago. And although I just pulled this into a file called Daniel Christev, I wanted to honor him and his site on YouTube, and it actually got me thinking. So although he does tutorials and teaches very well, my tutorials or my movies are not, I'm not as patient as these other people, but I would like to highlight some of the things they've done. And this goes back to the earliest, let's say 2018. Actually, I think this was all done in 2018 December. I had just switched over from starting to play in Tinkercad and downloaded Rhino, or probably paid for my first license on a Mac computer, and I opened up some of their tutorials and started working with them. So going blind into these things, I'm going to pop them up and see what they have to say. And I don't have any notes, but from watching all of his range of videos, and this was him dealing with curve functionality, you can kind of make sense of going in here and seeing what happens. And although these are not his tutorials, I would recommend doing them. I'll show you how they had an effect on me. So I was not that skilled in Rhino, so I bring in a curve. I learned very quickly how to take a geometry and right-click on these parameters and set one curve and see what happens. I've deactivated this whole script, so I basically put the preview on. You can see that this file takes that curve and divides that by a number slider, which I can play with and change the amount of points within that curve and end up with a line, obviously meant to draw a line between those, actually from those to another curve. So I'm going to go back in, I'm going to generate another curve within the Rhino window, set that to my second curve in this script, and you can see that this is a pretty basic tutorial that you'd find on most people's sites. Daniel Rutten played with it a bit, the creator of Grasshopper for McNeil's, and you can see we have a line that's drawn between this set of points on this curve, this set of points on this curve, and draws into these lines, and you can actually play with the amount of those points on the curve to make it happen. What happened here, I think it's interesting, is I take these two lines, and if I activate this one, preview on, it's basically a loft tool between, if I take off, if I make this visible, if I take that curve, I take this curve, and of course the two curves have already been generated, so I can hide them. But you can see I take the first curve and the second curve. This one's been reparametized, so it actually has data between 0 and 1. You'll do that in some cases. I'm going to do it on both of them. So basically, I have a loft between these two curves. One curve, two curves, and loft in between it. That said, you go down here, you still got the two curves. I think this one is brought into this tool, and one plugin I would suggest to get very early on is the bifocals plugin, because now you can see I can leave it on icons, and I see I have an evaluate curve and an evaluate curve, and once again there's that reparameterize symbol. I don't think it's important I have it reparameterized there because I've already reparameterized the curve, reparameterized that curve. There's my points on curve, and there's my oh my gosh, what am I calling it? The parameter or of t, which is just a single point along the curve. It gets a little more interesting when you get into MD sliders, where you're dealing in UV curves or ISO curves on a surface. Basically, I can take that curve. I can take this point on the other curve that's been reparametized. Like I said, it's not necessary to reparameterize it if I've reparameterized the original curves. And I'm able to slide along there, and then I build a line that I actually have parametric control as a geometry. And that's pretty much his first example. That's 4 minutes. And like I said, I'd just like to pay homage to why I will watch the tutorials and someone like Daniel Christev. I don't have his name here. I'll put a link to him. And I'll start to a little small video series that plays with and manipulates and looks at some of the scripts that he interested me in and actually had a major effect on me wanting to go into Grasshopper. Let's just do this as a, open up the file and just see what happens. A little cut there.